The Pats start the day with 8 wide receivers and finish with 6 as chaos unfolds. That's where we start on this episode of Locked On Patriots.
You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Patriots fans? I'm your host, Nick Cattles, born and raised in New England, also host of the Everything Pats podcast, co-host of the Greg Bedard Patriots podcast with Nick Cattles, and a sports talk show host veteran. On today's episode, a new face in town puts heat on an expected roster lock. And after 24 hours of roster shaking and moving, this team still needs help. But first, the wide receiver position continues to spark debate and interest. We appreciate you joining the show, making us your first listen, and for being an everydayer. The Locked On Patriots podcast is a proud partner of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In this episode today, sponsored by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. A pretty crazy 24 hours for the Patriots, especially at wide receiver. The initial 53-man roster that we discussed last episode had not 6, not 7, but 8 wide receivers on it. I found it very difficult to believe that the Patriots would head into week 1 with 8 wide receivers. That's a very, very high number. 8 freaking receivers is just a bunch. Way too many invited to the party. And of course, within 24 hours, that number goes from 8 down to 6 by the end of hump day. Let's start with Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne was released. Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network was first on it. He posted, Bourne is healthy and wanted a fresh start. And right there, I said, wait a minute. Bourne wanted a fresh start? Was this Kendrick Bourne's call? Is that why he's no longer a Patriot? Pelissero followed up. New England had interest in Kendrick Bourne prior to his release, talking about possible trade offers. So, okay, wait a minute. Kendrick Bourne wanted a fresh start, but yet the Patriots had received trade interest for Kendrick Bourne, but they kept him on the 53 initially to only release him within 24 hours. What's going on? What's the story? Fortunately, my friend Andrew Callahan of the Boston Herald posted, the Patriots are releasing Bourne upon request after they failed to finalize a trade that would have sent him to Minnesota. Patriots had a trade on the table, trying to work it out with the Vikings. Didn't work it out. Bourne said, okay, I know you want me gone. You're trying to trade me. That's fine. Deal didn't happen. Now let me go. But it's not just that. Callahan had a follow-up. The Patriots inquired about Bourne taking a pay cut, but were told no. So I'm just gathering all of this information, and here's my theory. The Patriots wanted to deal Bourne, and that's why he wasn't out there against the Giants. Reportedly, he would have practiced if he was not released. So it feels like he was ready to play. The Pats knew that he was ready to play, but they wanted to deal Kendrick Bourne because they saw the rest of their roster at wide receiver, and they thought, when it comes to Kendrick Bourne and what he's going to do for us and how much money he makes, it's just logical to try to ship him somewhere and get an asset back. Well, of course, Kendrick Bourne and the Patriots knew this going into cutdown day. Patriots and Vikings are talking. Now, I don't know if it was compensation or it was money. I would think at least some of this was the Vikings not willing to take on the full guarantee of Kendrick Bourne's contract for this season and next season. So the Patriots, knowing that there was a little bit of haggling going on back and forth, didn't want to cut Kendrick Bourne before the initial 53-man because they wanted to hold on to him, hoping they had leverage, which I had mentioned in prior episodes, and said if we hold on to him, maybe that would force the Vikings to make a move. Maybe they will acquiesce to what we're asking for. Meanwhile, the Vikings, they make a trade for Adam Thielen, and once that happens, the Patriots know they're up a creek without a paddle. And so now they got to figure out what to do. All of this is going on. They're asking Kendrick Bourne to take a pay cut. He's set to make $5.5 million guaranteed. They don't think his role on this team justifies $5.5 million guaranteed. Well, the Vikings don't cave. Bourne doesn't cave. Kendrick Bourne says, I'm not taking the pay cut. I want out. I was willing to play ball. You guys were trying to send me to Minnesota. It didn't work. Just release me. And the Patriots said, fine, we will release you. That's my theory. And I am surprised that Kendrick Bourne just never got it going in camp. I thought he was going to be a contributor to this offense. With his experience with Josh McDaniels, I'm just surprised. But he never really got it going in camp. Then he had the injury at the scrimmage, which just took him out for a couple of weeks. And once that happened, he was almost stuck in the Jalen Polk vortex because you're out. The Patriots have a ton of receivers that they're throwing the football to. Efton Chisholm is making a charge. Kayshon Boutte solidifies his spot on the roster. You're just giving Kyle Williams more opportunity to make some noise. So the injury was really the death knell when you look back. And the Patriots, they have to look at Stephon Diggs and Kyle Williams and Pop Douglas and say, we don't necessarily need Kendrick Bourne in 2025 unless he's going to sit here at our price. But we don't have the necessity of him on this roster. So the Patriots, they save $5.3 million by cutting Bourne. And we'll see if they end up using that money somehow, some way. Maybe it helps them acquire Jacoby Myers. Maybe it doesn't matter. Then you had Jayvon Baker. Baker, he's gone. And it was obvious, as we had discussed, he did not do enough at wide receiver. Jayvon Baker did not prove himself as a consistent NFL wide receiver at any point during his, year and a half with this team. And so he was being held on to for special teams purposes. Patriots, they end up making a move for Charles Woods. And because that move is made, they say to themselves, well, there's some special teams there with Woods. We don't need Baker for special teams. And I do think it's likely that Jayvon Baker lands on the practice squad. Don't forget, during the draft process, he had some red flags. Those red flags were reported on by Greg Bedard. And I think some teams had Baker reportedly off their board. So I don't think Jayvon Baker is beloved by a bunch of teams. He could still end up signing somewhere, but if he signs somewhere, what are they going to do with him? He has to be put on the 53 if you're claiming him via waivers. So I don't think that's going to happen. The red flags and the lack of production at that position, it would be a luxury for a team to have a Jayvon Baker on it as that, last piece of the special teams puzzle and sprinkle in some wide receiver work. And here's my big takeaway from Bourne and Baker being gone. They're expendable. You could not say that in 2024. You needed Kendrick Bourne to come back healthy. Remember how much emphasis was on that. When's he going to come back? Is he going to be healthy after that ACL? They need him. They need the help at that position. You were hoping when they drafted Jayvon Baker that he was going to be the answer at X. They needed somebody, anybody, to show up at that position. The boundary receiver. This year, different story. And that's when you know that they have upgraded at wide receiver. Do they have an alpha male in the room? No, they don't. Do they have a top 10 wide receiver core? No, they don't. But they absolutely have improved. And that improvement in that room made these two guys expendable. Stephon Diggs, you don't need Kendrick Bourne. Kyle Williams, Mac Hollins, you don't need that boundary receiver with your fingers crossed in Jayvon Baker. And I think the Patriots are fine. Second receiver through the sixth receiver on this roster, I think they're fine. I think they have a good enough room. They're just missing the alpha. Still missing the alpha. Two new faces added. We just talked about a couple of faces leaving. Well, two new faces added, and one particular Pat might want to check on that lease. Find out who and why next as we continue with today's episode of Locked On Patriots, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason, it's over. College football, it's here. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in the game. Check out this weekly flyer. For this weekend, PrizePicks offering major max discounts. One of those max discounts, Dak Prescott over 1/2 passing yard. That's right, just a half a passing yard. That's a max discount. PrizePicks, simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. The flex play option, total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you still double your money. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. We have a special request over here at Locked On. We want to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. And this is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. And of course, as I always say, thank you, truly thank you for helping us out. The Patriots, they're not in position to just stand still. And they added 2 guys after their initial 53-man roster. And one of those guys is at a premium position. Let's all welcome in Tommy DeVito from the New York Giants. And last episode, I talked about DeVito being an option. I thought it made a lot of sense to bring in DeVito for a legitimate quarterback competition. Look, Joshua Dobbs has not earned the second job. What has Dobbs done that made you walk away from this camp, this preseason, saying, oh, that guy's got a headlock on the backup quarterback gig? I haven't said that. I'm sure you haven't said that. And if you were even thinking about saying that, I'm sure the Dobbs to Kyle Williams pass that led Williams likely to a concussion protocol made you stop right in your tracks and say, maybe I should think differently here about Joshua Dobbs. I know he's got a cool nickname in the NASA astronaut or whatever the heck it is. I butchered that, but you get it. You get it. Cool nickname, nice story, terrible ball placement, puts receivers in bad positions. So why not have a competition? Why not bring DeVito in? And Tommy DeVito has played in the NFL. He only has 3 interceptions. He tends to take decent care of the football. So he has that experience. And Tommy DeVito, he fits the system. He fits the Patriots system. If you look at what the Giants do, what the Patriots do, for example, Tommy DeVito can throw the football down a seam. He can make a nice seam pass to a tight end. So he's a nice fit. And because the Patriots claimed Tommy DeVito, that means he's going to be on the 53-man roster for week 1. So Joshua Dobbs, if you felt like you were safe, and I'm sure Joshua Dobbs did not feel too safe because of his history. He has played for a number of teams, and there's also a reason why he has played for a number of teams. But if Joshua Dobbs had any kind of confidence about his roster spot of him being the backup quarterback, well, I think now that confidence is waning, and he might want to check on the lease because Tommy DeVito is going to compete for this job. And I think it's a great move given the circumstances of what the Patriots were dealing with. I think it's a very good idea to create that competition behind Drake May. Second new face for the Patriots, Charles Woods. Who is Charles Woods? I'm be honest with you, I had no idea who Charles Woods was before the Patriots claimed him. No clue. But I know about him now. So Charles Woods played 12 games last year for the Los Angeles Rams as an undrafted free agent. He's got good size. He's 5'11". He's about 190 pounds. We know that Mike Vrabel, Terrell Williams, their secondary coaches, they like bigger corners. They went out and they signed Carlton Davis to the contract they signed him to, in part because he's a bigger, longer, physical cornerback. So Woods, 5'11", about 190. And if you look at Charles Woods, it's a pretty simple equation here. Charles Woods is your replacement for Marcellus Dial. Marcellus Dial, the pick from 2024, goes down with the torn ACL. He was somebody who could play some outside corner. I believe that Vrabel and Williams were looking at Marcellus Dial as a possible option also in the slot to maybe play some big nickel. So you lose Dial, and you got to replace him. But you also don't have to replace his, cornerback skills. Marcellus Dial was also one of the gunners for the team. And Jayvon Baker replaced Dial after the injury. And so now what you do is you look at Charles Woods. Charles Woods has experience as a gunner and a jammer special teams. Thanks to Taylor Kyles of CLNS who pointed that out. I was questioning when Baker was cut, are they cutting him because they believe Woods is going to be capable of playing gunner? Because that was really the only role that Jayvon Baker was on the team for. And the answer is yes. Thanks to Taylor Kyles, the answer is yes. Charles Woods did play special teams for LA. He played the gunner. He played jammer. So that's the role. That's the Marcellus Dial role. And yes, Charles Woods has experience in the slot. So you look at him, 5'11", about 190, slot experience, special teams experience, also brings a little bit of versatility and can play a little bit on the outside. He's your Marcellus Dial. He's your sixth cornerback, Marcellus Dial guy. That's who he is. And this is just one more reminder, if people don't believe it, connections matter. Networking matters. Who you know matters. Tommy DeVito has a history of Brian Daboll. We talked about it in the prior episode. But it goes beyond that. According to Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network, the Patriots, they actually made a run at Tommy DeVito in 2023 before he signed with the Giants practice squad. And Elliott Wolf was in New England in 2023. Others in that front office were in New England in 2023. Don't forget Ryan Cowden, Vrabel's confidant, who he brought over from where? The Giants. So Cowden was there last year with Tommy DeVito. And when you look at Charles Woods, Thomas Brown has connections to that coaching staff from his time under Sean McVay. You also have Stretch. John Stretch Stryker was in L.A. last year with McVay. Woods was out there in L.A. So obviously, Stretch has influence with this roster. We've known that for at least a few months now. So Stretch says, hey, this guy Charles Woods, I think he can help us. I think he could be an answer at the tail end of that cornerback depth chart for us. Slot guy, can play some outside, plays special teams. So connections matter. And this is just the most recent example. The sign outside Foxborough still reads, help wanted. We'll tell you why next as we continue with today's episode of Locked On Patriots, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast. On average, how fast? 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. And if traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, get this, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. And it's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place that first $5 bet. New customers, bet $5. If that bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It's FanDuel.com. One thing is clear over the past couple of days, watching all the shaking and moving the Patriots have done to this roster, the team has holes. I know, breaking news, your football team has some holes to deal with. I do believe the Patriots are on their way to compete, but they're still steps away. And we've seen that, this juggling act that's happening. And if there were a sign hanging up at the front of Gillette Stadium, that sign would read "Help Wanted." Because when you look at multiple spots on this roster, multiple positions, you still don't feel 100% confident. Let me start with the interior offensive line. The Patriots need to add a veteran. I don't know if they're going to be capable of adding a veteran, but when I look at this roster, I say to myself, they are short. They're short one guy at least that can play guard, maybe some center. Now, maybe you feel good about Ben Brown. The Patriots feel good about Ben Brown, or as good as they can feel about Ben Brown, given what other options they have. But Ben Brown has not been a guard at the NFL level until this preseason. That doesn't make me feel ultra confident. I'm fine with Ben Brown at center. But is he truly a guard in the NFL? Jury's still out. Jared Wilson, it feels like he's going to be your starting left guard. I'm not sure the Patriots are fully confident that he's going to be capable of doing that job at a high enough level to keep the gig for this entire season. We'll see. But there was some hesitancy, before that Vikings game. And all of a sudden, Ben Brown was at left guard. Jared Wilson was sitting out. Then Jared Wilson was the second left guard out there. Then he was playing some center. Alec Lindstrom is on the practice squad. Mekhi Butler on the practice squad. Jack Conley on the practice squad. Do you have any confidence in any of those guys? I would feel so much better. Caden Wallace, do you have any confidence in a guy who was a right tackle, then maybe a left tackle, then a right tackle, and now he's a left guard? I would feel so much better if you could give me one more veteran on this team that could play specifically guard. If you could play center in case of an emergency, great. But I would like one more guy, at least one more guy. Then you look at inside linebacker, off the ball linebacker, and just think about how critical Marte Mapu is. If Marte Mapu goes down, I don't think the Patriots have a linebacker that is capable of consistently covering in the pass game, and that's an issue. Like, if you told me Marte Mapu was going to be this critical to the operation before week one, I'd have my concerns. And Jack Gibbons, there's some questions of, does he have enough juice to stay at that position? Jelani Tavai starts on the injured reserve, designated to return list. I have no issue with Robert Spillane. I think he's a stud. I think he's a really good football player. But I would like a little bit more insurance with a veteran in that spot. Mapu is making this transition from safety to linebacker. Tight end 3, we've been talking about it for a while now. And I wonder, is the holdup the Patriots just waiting to find somebody who might be that perfect hybrid tight end / fullback? Are they going to roll with, I think you have to roll with a third tight end. The Jakob Johnson thing that I discussed in the prior episode, I still think Jakob Johnson could be added to this team in due time. And maybe he's been added as I'm talking. We'll see. But do you really feel good about having, G. Scott and CJ Dupree on your practice squad as your third tight end if you go out and get a fullback like Jakob Johnson and cut Jack Westover? You feel good about that? Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, both going to be 31. In offensive tackle, I still think there are some questions there. I would really feel better if you had a bona fide veteran tackle on this team that could act as your swing tackle behind Campbell and Morgan Moses, that could go in there without much of an issue and back up Moses, who's 34 and coming off surgery. Marcus Bryant, I like as a developmental talent, but God forbid something happens early in this season. You're throwing Marcus Bryant out there to the Wolves. And if something happens to Morgan Moses, now you've got two rookie tackles learning on the job to go along with a rookie left guard learning on the job. So I would feel much better if you had some kind of veteran presence beyond Vidarian Lowe, because Bryant is ahead of Lowe right now. I would love somebody else. So help wanted. The sign is still hanging. Let's move on to Braden Swinson. Interesting, right? Braden Swinson cut by the Patriots for their initial 53-man roster. There were questions. Wow, they cut a fifth-round pick, the potential that he has. It's a risk. Is he going to get picked up? Is he be claimed by somebody? The answer was no. Braden Swinson was not picked up by another team, and this is an example of really good roster manipulation by the Patriots. Reading the tea leaves throughout the league, understanding that they could cut their fifth-round pick, who has that potential, that they, I would imagine, still want to work with, but they could still work with him without being, quote-unquote, stuck with him on the 53. So that's good roster management, roster manipulation by the Patriots. Good job by them. Other good roster manipulation is Jayvon Baker. We talked about the whole special teams thing earlier on this episode. He, in essence, was a special teams placeholder. And they were looking for somebody who could play that gunner position. They were not looking for somebody who could play receiver. So they used Baker as that placeholder at gunner, and they did a good enough job, shout out Jeremy Springer, of developing Jayvon Baker quickly enough on special teams to feel okay to keep him on the roster if need be. And then you look at the quarterback management. They let go of Wooldridge, even though I don't think they were super happy with Joshua Dobbs. They felt like they could find somebody better. They go out and they get the only quarterback. I believe Tommy DeVito was the only quarterback that was claimed. They go out there, they get the job done, they pick him up. They're looking at the teams ahead of them, the quarterback position. They understand they were fourth in priority, and they had an opportunity to gobble up a quarterback that they think will be very competitive against Dobbs. So that's good roster management, roster manipulation. And finally, I look at the heavy investment in some of these positions. Patriots have invested heavily in a few positions. Defensive end, for example, edge. They have 6 guys right now on the roster, if you count Keon White as an edge, which I do. And they still have Truman Jones on the practice squad. So they loaded up at that position. They kept Anthony Jennings, even though he might not be a perfect fit, which I agree with. Safety, they have 6 safeties if you count Brendan Schooler, and I do. Wide receiver, they went from 8 down to 6, but they also have 2 guys on the practice squad right now, John Giles and Jeremiah Webb, and it's likely they're going to have Jayvon Baker on the practice squad as well. So you could have 6 on the 53 and then have 3 on the practice squad. And you look at the numbers at cornerback. You've got 6 cornerbacks on the roster after, adding via the claim of Charles Woods. And then you've got, those 6 guys on the roster, but you also have Battle, Crossley, and Minor on the practice squad. And Christian Gonzalez did not practice again, so we've got to keep an eye on that now that we're getting closer to the Raiders, but there's been no IR movement for Gonzalez. That wraps up this edition of Locked On Patriots. Reach out to me on Twitter at Nick C Radio. Don't forget to throw a comment in on the YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Help a brother out. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe to this pod. It's another big moment on Locked On, by the way. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff. So you got your first listen here with Locked On Patriots as an everydayer. As a second listen, check out Locked On, and Fire TV, the college football kickoff. Drake Toll leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, Locked On's local experts, college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch college football kickoff every Thursday throughout the season only on Fire TV. Have a great day. We're going to see you tomorrow.